On today's episode of Hungry for Wisdom, why are the Proverbs always telling me what's wrong with me? Well, because if they told us what was right with us, the book of Proverbs would be the size of a postcard. Pride is a killer, so kill pride, or it will be killing you. And the world says there's something wrong with your kid, but Jesus made him just the way he wants him. So the world can, in the words of my children, go suck a fish. It's episode 87. Turn it up! That's right. Hey, Ben, what should happen next?
Double kick.
Double kick.
Double kick. This is my heart on caffeine right now.
Yes. Which, by the way, we have some of. Cheers. That's good coffee music, especially this part.
Yes. Just makes my heart sing.
It doesn't get any better than that.
Agreed.
Today's episode is dedicated to our boy Steve, who is the owner, operator, and chief awesomeness officer of... He'd probably punch me if he heard me say that.
He probably would.
Yeah, it's not his style.
But he is good.
But it's true.
Yes.
It's true. I speak the truth. And we're going to shout out his business here. It is Creative Remodeling. And he's the man. I don't know what to tell you. He was just out at my place fixing a real big problem because it was
real big
raining in my kitchen.
that is a big problem.
And I called him and I was like, hey, Steve, I got questions regarding a skylight and they're somewhat time sensitive. Anyway, he comes over, helps me out, does a great job. Good prices. So if you guys need a contractor at your house, you need a remodel done or whatever, he is taking calls. Oh, I pulled that up because the number was on here. Oh. So while I'm pulling this up again, ask yourself, do I need a contractor? Do I want my wife to think I'm super handy? Is my wife going out of town and I want to get something done and take full credit for it, but I actually want to hire it out?
You're not speaking about anything that might be happening in the Nissen home at any way, shape, or form.
No, when I'm preaching, I do get accused of reading a lot of people's text messages, but on this one, no. All right, guys, if that's you, call Creative Remodeling 509, because he's Tri-City's local reppin'. What? 509-551-5798. We are here with Ben the Bearded Beaver.
What's up?
Yes, sir. Oh, there goes the Emperor's Groove. We're here with Bailey, the podcast princess. Good to have you back, sis. And you're here with me, who doesn't have a nickname. Let's get into some wisdom. One of these days, we're going to do a podcast where we just dance to good music.
Where you two dance to good music.
Audio only.
Yeah, okay.
We don't even need microphones or cameras. We'll just record the music and we can dance in the studio while it's happening.
And then we release it.
Actually, that is our last question today with the This Isn't That. Guys, hey, for you listeners, that was not a joke, but that'll make sense to you in a few minutes. So, today we are in Proverbs 6. Proverbs 6, verses 16 through 19. I'm really only going to do 16 and 17, but I want to read you the whole thing because it really is kind of one thought. Proverbs 6:16. There are 6 things which Yahweh hates. Yes, 7, which are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. All right, so why does God seem to have such a raving hatred for a little good old-fashioned self-esteem? Well, he doesn't, but that self-worship that oozes out of your eyeballs is pretty much the opposite of what Jesus was like, so God's not into it. I want to zero in on why God says that he hates haughty eyes. Okay, we'll deal with the rest of this on the next episode. Today, it's just the haughty eyes, but let's break this down real quick. All right, so there are 6 things which Yahweh hates. Yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. So kind of a weird way of talking, the 6 and the 7 thing. What's this all about? Well, the Jews used to talk this way so that you could basically remember it. It's a poetic way of saying this stuff. The 6 and 7 thing, it doesn't make a ton of sense, like grammatically, but that's okay. They don't care. It's just a poetic way of saying God is keeping count, right? He's paying attention. He's looking at details here. For example, Amos 1:13 and following says all these things about like, for 3 transgressions and for 4 of this nation, I will not revoke judgment. Same thing, right? Then he lists off their transgressions. So he's watching, he's keeping records of this stuff as it happens. You guys heard this about Santa Claus when you were little, right? He's making a list, he's checking it twice, right? He's counting your good deeds and your bad deeds. That's just guilt, that's false gospel. But God is actually keeping track of absolutely everything that happens in the world, and he can count them as easily as he can count the hairs on your head. So here in Proverbs, the number 7, obviously a favorite number for Jewish writers, they like to group things into sevens, right? So the whole 6 things, no 7 things way of talking is designed to be a memorable way of expressing God, counting up the deeds of man, ending with the number 7, which is, of course, the number of completeness. Here's the point. He sees it all. He sees everything. Now, on the note of this being phrased in a memorable way, you can tell that it's designed to be memorized by kids, especially. This is a catechism tool. And probably, I would guess, with hand motions to go along with it, but those didn't make it into the Bible. But there are 5 body parts mentioned here, and they pretty much move from head to feet. So the eyes, the tongue, the hands, the heart, the feet, right? So this is designed to just stick into the brain, and it's visual as much as it is verbal. So starting with the eyes, he says, God hates haughty eyes, right? Haughtiness, hubris, pride. God's not into it. And so, you think about this, that pride is the root of almost all sin, right? Like, not maybe all sin, like, but there are also like the sins of foolishness or like ignorance where you just don't know things. Like, so there's maybe some of that, but usually it's pride. It's pretty much always pride. And so we think we know better than God in this situation, so we do something that's disobedient to God, right? It's like, yeah, I know that God says not to do this in the Bible, but that's in general. And in general, I agree. But this specific situation is different. Translation: God didn't see my situation coming when he issued his eternal commands, and so I'll just take over as ultimate moral arbiter for a second. Pride, right? It's hubris. That's what that is. So, actually, to tell you the truth, all sin, and I think I can say this categorically, all sin is rooted in unbelief. It's all rooted in unbelief, right? Like, so in this moment, I'm believing something about myself or about the situation that that results in Jesus not being in charge and not being obeyed. So that's unbelief. When you're in sin, you can always ask yourself, where's your unbelief? If you're counseling somebody that's just struggling with sin, I just can't kick this one thing. A good first question is, where's your unbelief? Let's find that. That'll be at the root of it. So the fact that Solomon assigns this characteristic of pride to the eyes is very picturesque. He's talking about that guy that walks into a room with that look on his face that clearly communicates that he's above everybody else there. Right? The guy carries himself with a posture of superiority and would be happy to explain to you why that's justified, given the chance. So Solomon says, God gives this a thumbs down. He's not a fan of this posture. The phrase haughty eyes carries with it the idea that we are like confidently looking up when we should be humbly looking down. So there's that old custom that you don't look a king in the eyes because you're not his equal. You're just not. You look down in the presence of a king and you never turn your back on him. It's seen as disrespectful. You have to be humble in the presence of somebody greater than you. My man here in Proverbs 6, no such humility, no such reverence. He thinks everybody should be extending him the right hand of fellowship as an equal peer. He's not willing to put himself below anybody else. He's got haughty or unjustifiably elevated eyes. And so God calls us to know when we're out of our league, when we're punching above our weight class. I was taking a guy I was training in ministry. He went on to do some youth ministry somewhere else, took a job, did a great job. He ended up excellent. I'm about to tell a story about him that's not flattering, so I will leave his name out. I just want you to know the story has a happy ending. He learned. All right. When we all go through this, I took him down to Texas for this training op, and we were sitting around the table with a bunch of pastors, and they were all talking about their combined 4 billion years of experience in ministry, and something was said that he disagreed with. And so he was like, you can't say that to somebody. And he like called out the pastors sitting around the table. And they were gracious, of course. They just kind of looked at him like, okay, we got to listen to this kid for a minute. We'll get past it. And then they continued with their conversation. I'm looking at him like, dude, you came with me, man. Like, stop. Like, the shame of this situation is splashing off onto me because I'm discipling you. So I pulled him aside later and I was like, hey, in those situations, even if you're right, tape your big mouth shut. You don't get to say that. You're not on an equal level with these dudes. They deserve your reverence. So anyway, humility, people, is what I'm getting at. All right, 1 John 2:16 says this, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but from the world. And the world is passing away, and also its lusts. In other words, the things that you want now, you're not going to want them later. They're not going to matter, right? The stuff that you think is solid gold now will be paving for a street later on. It's fit for nothing more than to be trampled underfoot in the world that is to come. This world is passing away, and also its lusts. But the one who does the will of God lives forever. All right, now that's a very important thing to say. Even more significant for our understanding of this is the fact that it comes right after this was said in the verse previous to it. Do not let the world nor the things of the world do not love the world nor the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Ouch. So when you got haughty eyes, you're loving something, status, your self-esteem, feeling like top dog, whatever it is, you're loving something of the world. And that is counterbalanced with the love of the Father, and there's an inverse relationship. The more of one you have, the less of the other that you have in your daily experience. So anyway, as I said, and as I will continue to say, humility. One thing I should specify, humility is, I should say it this way, pride is not the same thing as confidence. Sometimes you got to have some confidence in life, right? Mm-hmm. You got a job to do, I want you to approach it confidently. You got to go be a parent. You need to walk in there knowing that you're in charge and accepting no substitutes, right? If you're the boss at work, it's a good thing to say, no, this is what we're doing, and I'm right about this because I got all my facts set and whatever. There are times for that. Confidence is not the same thing as arrogance. Sometimes they look the same on the front end, and people that have never really had to navigate that difference from like a position of authority in the home or the place of business or whatever, they may not be able to tell the difference, but God sees the heart. So pride is out. Not everything that might come across that way, you got to be careful to manage those perceptions well, and that's part of wisdom. But pride, there is no wisdom in it. I conclude my rant. You have a new job. How's it going?
It's going really good.
Is it? Wow, that was an abrupt end of the music. I'm just going to keep that going for a little while.
Ooh, yeah. All right. Yeah, it's going good.
Nice.
Enjoying it, doing graphic design stuff.
Cool. I just want to give a shout out because, you guys might not know this, but Bailey, the podcast princess here, is a sought-after professional in what she does for us here. And so we're just really blessed to have snagged you and have a little bit of a claim on your time first so that we can say, no, we still need you. We still need you. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, I think we've... Huh?
She's internet famous.
Yeah.
Bailey.
Oh.
Internet. Sorry. Famous.
Sounded like you were dropping a beat there.
No.
Bailey. Internet. Famous.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Boy. It's awkward now.
Yeah.
I'm bringing the awkward with me today.
Hey, if I ever have to freestyle in this program again, you're beatboxing, all right?
You got it. Absolutely.
I'm so
Although
into
I can't beatbox like that one gal. Oh gosh, she was beatboxing with her dad, right? They were two African. Like she was an African American gal and her dad, and they were doing the beatbox contest, and she was just cleaning the floor with him. She
No
just
way.
destroyed him. I mean, he was doing great.
Dude.
And all of a sudden, she just does this. And I don't know what she does, but it's just amazing.
Superhuman. Yeah, and it's tough for women to be good beatboxers because you don't have that big opening for the bass, for the kick sound, right? So.
Oh, yeah, but man, whatever
She
she
figured it out.
needed to have, she had, and it was good.
Little Miss Industrious.
Yes.
All right. Well, I believe, good sir, that we have some questions that have come in from listeners.
I think we'd have.
Yeah.
And I think it is up to our podcast princess to read.
Yeah, and a
us
couple of these
those.
are longer, so we're going to make you do this because you have a much easier voice to listen to than either of us.
For some reason, they come to us for wisdom, but they don't come to us for our voices.
No, we don't do voiceover work.
No.
Alrighty, I can read
Or
them.
modeling. So, hey,
No.
that being the case, let's flip on some microphones and cameras.
Yes, exactly.
Why not?
Alrighty, question number 1. How should we...
I'm sorry.
Okay, just to let you know, dear listener, if you hear anything being fired or gun being cocked, it is because we have a plague of flies has befallen this particular office, and so Dustin is on the hunt.
Well, this particular building, let's be fair. I mean, it's not like they're just taking up residence in here.
No, they are not. No, but they apparently like the lighting.
Yeah, it's true.
know.
So if you hear this, pay no mind.
Yeah.
Alright, cool. Alright.
Although Bailey might leap just a little bit, but
I will jump, but don't worry, I'm fine. It's just salt.
I noticed you wore your protective eye gear, though. I think you saw this coming.
I use these more than just for seeing. All right, question number 1. Should we read the
Apocrypha.
Oh,
Apocrypha.
man.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
a word right there. Should we read the Apocrypha?
The Apocrypha.
The Apocrypha. Yes, is my answer.
It's yeah. I mean, so if you're wanting to understand what the Apocrypha is, right? The Apocrypha.
Reading it won't help.
Reading it won't help. It is what sometimes what we call is the intertestamental documents. So, for example, like First and Second Maccabees, Book of Jude. No,
Is Jubilees in there?
I don't.
I don't think
forget.
it is.
But they're books that were considered quote canon by the Catholic Church at the Council of
Trent, yeah, I think 1519. So yeah, I mean, it's like, well, yeah. Go ahead. I'll give the whole history lesson here in a minute.
Yeah. So basically, they're books that many Catholic scholars still consider to be part of the Word of God, but were never really accepted by the Church, even up and through the Protestant Reformation. And these are books that have various stories, like a dragon and
Bell and the Dragon.
Bell
That's a
and
good
Dragon.
read. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you get strange, you have strange names like the Book of Enoch and things like that. And so
Yeah, that one I don't think made the Apocrypha.
No, is it pseudepigrapha then?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So these are some of them are histories. We don't know how accurate they are, but they are histories of the intertestamental period with the Jews, and then also we have a number of different like prophetic works that are, that were not necessarily received even by Judaism or by the Old Testament saints as what's it called? Canonical, right? They weren't there, but there's some interesting reading going on there.
Yeah, it's good, and it'll feed your mind, and it'll actually feed your soul. Not in the sense that inspired Scripture will, but some very devoted, God-loving people wrote this stuff. It's good. There's also some good wisdom literature in there. So there's one called The Wisdom of Solomon, which reads a lot like the Book of Proverbs, and there is some excellent stuff in there. Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of reading the Apocrypha. Mm-hmm. And that is not a popular thing to say in Protestant circles, because the debate has typically been, it's part of the Bible. No, it's not part of the Bible. And it seems like if you speak positively about the Apocrypha, then you're a Catholic. So let me just fill out some history here. Basically what happened, I was like distracted by this fly that's
Would you like me to
okay, here. Yeah. You got the conch shell while I'm talking. All right. So now I'm going to be distracted by you hunting. That's all right. Do it. Go forth and conquer. So the intertestamental period, there was 400 years between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament. So Malachi, Micah, and I think Zechariah were the last three. Zephaniah? I think it was Zechariah. Were the last three of the Old Testament prophets.
Yep.
And they were doing their thing. And then Micah chapter 3 says, you know what? God's done with you. Malachi says, you know what? God's done with you for a while. Just done talking to you. So 400 years passed until John the Baptist showed up and announced, okay, the Messiah is here. Here's the guy. Everything you've been waiting for the last 400 years is happening now. So turn or burn, right? And saying all of that while wearing some handmade like camel hair, by the way, like handmade camel leather. Boss move. Yeah. So he gets points for that. But in that 400 years, a lot happened. So in that 400 years was Alexander the Great, and then he, died at like age 30 or 32 or whatever it was, and his kingdom got split up 4 different directions, and one of those emerged and became the Roman Empire. All this is spelled out in prophecy in Daniel 8 and 11, and so and partially in 9 also, I think. So anyway, the kingdom splits up of Greece. Rome comes up, and then Rome kind of like has its heyday, and that's when Jesus is born, is sort of at the height of the Roman Empire. So there was a lot that was going on. And that whole time, Israel, that Palestinian strip right there, was passed around between these kingdoms like a baseball card. And so there was oppression and changes and revolutions and failed coups and all kinds of stuff, right? Like you mentioned the book of Maccabees. So there was this guy named Judas Maccabeus. His nickname was Judas the Hammer.
The Hammer.
Which is almost as cool as Sons of Thunder. Came that close.
It is.
But he was before the apostles, right? So he gets Judas the Hammer, and then Jesus just straight up one-ups the dude because Jesus dominates. That's how he goes. Christ is Lord is what I meant to say. That'd be the theological way to say it. So Judas Maccabeus starts a rebellion, and it actually worked. They actually kicked the pagans out of Jerusalem for a while. So this is a high point in Jewish history. In fact, when they celebrate Hanukkah, that's what they're celebrating. And Jesus celebrated that himself. In John chapter 7, it's called the Festival of Lights. This is what it was, right? So it's a big time thing. And so during that 400 years, you get all of these Jewish writings that kind of codify their culture. and they're being oppressed and they're being killed and they're being, taxed to death and all sorts of stuff. And in the middle of that, you get this wonderfully deep and loving and devoted theological thought towards God. And that's what helped keep people faithful in that time, because they didn't have any prophets. God wasn't sending any more prophets, right? When Micah 3 said the sun will go down on the prophets, that's what happened. And so anyway, these are the writings that got him through that. So they all wind up being very precious writings in the Jewish thinking. So you could think of like Shakespeare, right?
Yep.
In our culture, we have the Bible, which shaped our culture, and we have Shakespeare, which really helped also. And so if you were going to try and preserve our culture, you would reasonably want to get a Bible and get some Shakespeare. And there are, other writings in there too. Mm-hmm. Well, this was their Shakespeare. So when they're all spread out from Jerusalem, they can't get to the temple. The temple gets destroyed in 70 AD. Well, I guess that was later. But, the temple isn't there because it had been destroyed by the Babylonians and all of this. And so they have these synagogues, these places of meeting, so they can preserve their language and their culture and their worship and their religion. And all of their writings are housed in the synagogue. So they got their Torah scroll, they got all the scrolls of the prophets, and they've got all of these apocryphal, which just means extra and beyond. They've got all of these apocryphal writings. And so they read them right alongside Scripture, right? Very important stuff for preserving the Jewishness of Jewishness.
Yep. Oh, you're absolutely right.
Scholarly way to put that, Dustin. Way to go. Don't give me any nicknames right now. They're not going to be flattering. So then fast forward to about 400 AD. Jerome is translating the Bible from Greek and Hebrew into Latin, and he translates with it the Apocrypha. So now it's all one book. He's like, here's everything you would get in a synagogue, bada boom. Now, he never claimed that the apocryphal books were scripture, but he put them in there. And so now you've got this Bible that includes the Apocrypha. Well, as time goes on, the medieval Catholic Church did what they do, and they had a bunch of priests that couldn't even friggin' read, let alone provide any scholarly oversight to what they were teaching. So, it just winds up being the book. And so it sort of becomes part of the medieval Bible. And then there's the whole thing with the Protestant Reformation where they're like, wait a second, we need to go back and actually look at the Bible. Let's evaluate everything. And the Catholics were like, this is the Latin Vulgate. This is Jerome. This is the Bible. You can't mess with that. And the Protestants were like, well, no, you messed with it. We're going to get back what was originally there. So they had all of this stuff about how do you know what's inspired and what's not. And it was a really interesting debate. Long story, not so short. The Apocrypha is wonderful reading. Some of it's really confusing. Some of it's weird. At times it conflicts with pieces of the Bible, so we know it's not spirit inspired. But man, is it important historically and pretty darn good reading for the most part.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm in favor of reading it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like even we read certain religious authors today. They're not inspired, but they're worth reading.
Yeah. And I mean,
I love C.S. Lewis.
Right.
I love C.S. Lewis. There are spots where I disagree with C.S. Lewis,
but and you're allowed to because it's not Bible.
Yeah. And I could, right? Yep. But if I'm reading the book of Isaiah, for example, I don't get to disagree with that.
No, because if you disagree with God, what do? Grace and truth, change your mind. That's right. Now, it's also important because this is part of the backdrop and the worldview for the New Testament authors. Right? Yes. Like when they're thinking about things and they're formulating ideas, they're doing that in their culture. This is part of the information they're drawing on. So it's really helpful to kind of reconstruct pieces of what they're trying to get at sometimes.
Yeah. Great. Next question.
Alrighty. Next question we have from Paul Hedges. 1 Samuel.
Were we not supposed to?
I normally try to edit those things out. Missed that one. Hey, you know what though? I think he'll love it. Paul, shout out, buddy.
Paul, you're the man.
Paul.
No, Paul actually, yeah, my bad, dude. Paul actually now occupies a unique place in Hungry for Wisdom history. He goes in the museum as the only questioner that has ever had his first and last name published to the entire world.
Oh,
we have listeners in Ukraine. Now they know about Paul Hedges.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Paul, you are worldwide.
World famous. And probably in Indonesia, too. What?
All right, so question from Paul. 1 Samuel 16. God sends Saul an evil spirit. What the heck, bro? Was God making him go insane on purpose? And how can an evil spirit come from God?
Okay, let's take that first one first. Was God making Saul go insane on purpose? The answer to that is yes. This is what we call sovereignty. God gets to do what he wants, and if he wants to make one of his enemies go nuts, that's what he'll do. The heart of a king is like streams of water in the hands of God. He guides it where he wishes. In this particular case, he decided to guide it into some insanity. This is where you get to see our show prep come in.
Yep. So we're talking about verses 14 and following, I think.
Producer Tim's going to edit this out.
Yeah, I don't think so.
24 minutes.
It's on video.
All right, sorry. You found it? Read it.
Now the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a harmful spirit from the Lord tormented him. And Saul's servants said to him, Behold, now a harmful spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is skillful in playing the lyre, and when the harmful spirit from God is upon you, he will play it, and you will be well.
I think the ESV sanitized that, because in other translations it does say evil spirit. I'm going to look it up in the original.
That's a good question.
All right, so I'll do my original language nerdery while you address the issue of God making people go insane and that not being fair because they don't have a free choice in it.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. So
thought I'd just tee that one up for you.
That's great. I appreciate that. So I do think this does boil down to the fact that the spirits are subject to God, even the evil ones. And that is something that we need to be aware of. And that is something that I think is even very clear from even the book of Job. You look at the book of Job, right? The spirits had to go in front of God, and God calls out Satan. He says, "Hey, where have you been?" Satan's like, "I've been cruising the earth, great." And here's the other thing: God actually picks the fight with Satan over Job. Mm-hmm. He says, "Have you looked at my servant?" And
God's like hinting. He's like, "Hey, Satan, I don't want to point any fingers, but what about this guy over here?"
And I'm like, so for us, and again, this is where we also have to, with a good degree of humility, recognize, we're not God. So we don't have the whole picture. And it may sound condescending and that may sound like a cop-out, but the funny thing is that Paul uses almost that exact same cop-out in Romans 9 when he says, "Oh, shall the creatures say to him who formed it, why'd you make me this way?" We sometimes want to blur that line between the creator and the creature. And here we see God doing something even with his people, with a king who, by the way, had already rejected him. Yeah. And so we have some things going on there as well. But he does send this spirit of harm, or this evil spirit.
Yeah, so the Hebrew, literally, the word is evil spirit. It's ruach ra. Okay, so there is no other, harmful spirit. That's not a great translation, because there is a word for harmful, and this word is evil.
ESV, let me down.
Yeah, well, maybe just not to confuse people. Like,
probably
this is confusing. Yeah, but the other thing too, on a linguistic level, the Hebrew word for evil just basically means it's got a wide semantic range, right? Like there's a big range of meanings and this is the way Hebrew works, right? Like a word in Hebrew can sometimes mean a cluster of ideas. It's like, this word means something like that, and then you got to figure it out based on context. The word ra is pretty specific, but really it refers to anything that is experientially negative. Yeah. And the Jews would say that is evil. So if you get cancer, you would say, "A great evil has befallen me." Not because somebody did something to you that was morally wrong, but just because something experientially negative is happening to you. Mm-hmm. This is evil. An earthquake is evil in their way of thinking. So an evil spirit, let's not get too specific about it and say, okay, so God went and recruited a demon and then sent him out. It's kind of like 1 Kings 22, right? He's like, "Hey, I need to send out a lying spirit. Who will go and be a lying spirit for me?" And one of the angels is like, "Oh, yo, dog, I got that." And God's like, "You in the back, go." And so he goes and he lies and he tricks the armies and stuff like that. Well, they would experience that as evil, as deception. And yet, for what is good in God's sight might be experientially negative for his enemies.
Yeah, and I was also looking at Second Thessalonians 2:11, right? God sends a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So, and that's interesting that it would seem that once, I'm not necessarily saying this is all free will, but in the sense of when someone does actively reject God, that removes them from the protection of God.
You're not wrong.
And so I think that's some of the reasons why you have the warning passage in Hebrews. God's just saying, "Hey, dude, let's not go this route."
Yeah. Well, and I'm studying Exodus right now because that's what I'm preaching through. And I'm in Exodus 4 and this whole thing about I will harden Pharaoh's heart. So, of course, you get this age-old debate of, did Pharaoh have any free will? And I'm sitting here thinking do I have to care? I'm really working hard to care about this. It's not going well. But really what you have here is you have, well, I'll put it this way. I'm sitting back reading this passage, trying to figure out the best way to explain divine action here to a church, right? And it hits me. Pharaoh was not some like philanthropist that was running around helping people and selling his house in order to pay the bills of widows. And then God just came and said, you know what? I think I'm going to harden your heart. No, Pharaoh and his dad were the ones that like murdered babies to try and keep the throne, right? So when God turns somebody over to something, and when he sends them a strong delusion, and when he confirms the pathway that their heart actually desires, then in a sense, now this is only true in a sense, okay? From one angle, you could say that when God hardens somebody, he's actually enabling their free will, because because when they, like, if they were completely without restraint in their evil, this is what would end up happening. Yeah. Right. But there's all these other restraints where people can persuade them to make other decisions based on external pressures. Yeah. But it was really just the pure evil of his heart that God was like, I'm going to make sure that gets out. Yeah. So yeah, for God to make somebody insane or to send them an evil spirit or a lying spirit and all of these, I mean, we've hit Exodus 4, 2 Thessalonians 2, was it? And 1 Kings 22, 1 Samuel 16, all these different passages, you wind up compiling this mosaic, pun intended, of what God's character looks like. And it's a God who is absolutely in charge of stuff and will sometimes give people what they want in judgment. Yeah. Yeah. Saul wanted some evil. Yeah. God gave it to him.
Well, and you even see maybe, and this may be speculating on Psalm 51, but when David's saying, hey, don't take your spirit from me, maybe even seeing, like, I saw firsthand what it looked like when you removed your spirit from somebody, and all of a sudden now he's open to whatever else is coming. And he's like, yeah, I would be that way. Like,
don't let me be Saul.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I think that's a great point, because, we've all come in behind somebody who did a horrible job and said, don't let that happen. Well, okay, so you and I are pastors, right? Oh yeah. Like, how many pastors started out well, and then when they got older, they disqualified themselves or they wandered off, or they just got full of themselves to the point where you couldn't even talk to them anymore. And it's like, how did that happen? And we prayed those prayers. God, don't let that happen to me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what the heck? God gets to choose, right? Yeah. And whether it's a semantic of the language that is being communicated, that this evil spirit from God had tormented Saul or whatever that is.
And that's part of it.
Yeah. And that's part of it. Or is it also, hey, Saul, and he started down this path, and at the risk of sounding like, you make your bed and you lie in it. I mean, that was
pretty much,
Saul was pretty much making his bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right?
Buy the ticket, you take the ride.
Yeah. So you mess with the wolf, you get the howl.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I think that's good. You got it. You're just gonna have to start stepping in and
somebody. We need you to be a mom, okay? All right. Just mother us a little bit, which is a weird thing to say in front of your dad. But roll with me here. Now,
podcast.
I will.
She's the podcast princess and the podcast mom. This table's going to get really full if we need to have a podcast mom, too.
Yeah, that's true.
Which would be hilarious.
What she's going to do is stand up and put us in those chairs and lower the table. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, start rapping our knuckles and stuff. I will say also that in 1 Samuel 16, it's an important point that when David, who is the Messiah, he's the anointed one, when he plays music, it chases off the evil spirit.
Boom. Okay?
So, yes. Psalm 20, verse 3, Yahweh sits enthroned on the praises of his people. And so harmful spirits, whether they be, demonic or just, the judgment of God that's happening, whatever, it seems to be to be mutually exclusive with the presence of pure, actual worship for God. And so that's just something worth hanging on to.
Hey, pro tip, then play worship music in your house.
Yeah, a lot. Sing it. That's what Martin Luther said, right? He said, when I can't pray, I always sing. It's the best way to ambush the devil.
That is amazing.
Yeah, totally true. Yeah, because there were times where just in spiritual darkness, he wouldn't really be able to muster out prayers that he felt were genuine. And we've all been there, right? And so he said, I just sing because those are prayers that somebody else wrote, and then I don't have to muster up anything.
Oh, yeah.
And God's still getting glory, so let her rip.
Yeah, I think even like there are times where maybe I'll be struggling with sin or something like that, and in the back of my head, all of a sudden I've got hymns. Yeah. And I'm like, you're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what a boss David is to play a harp and sing in front of a dude who's liable to chuck a spear at him from time to time. I used to be a rock and roll musician. I was playing in biker bars and I played in some rowdy gigs, right? I've never once been worried that somebody was going to throw a spear at me. That's a new kind of pressure.
That's playing to a really harsh crowd. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Alrighty, ready for question 3?
As long as you don't drop the name, because I'm sure I forgot to delete it.
Well, we'll find out. All right.
Along with the rest of the world.
All right, question 3. My ADHD kiddo is highly distractible. So asking him to clean his room might go right out of his head, or he gets distracted by a billion things on the way to do what I asked. How should we handle this? Is it disobedience if his brain just can't hold on to a thought for more than 5 seconds? I sometimes feel like I would be spanking this child 10 times a day if this is that case. So basically, how do we still have standards and require obedience while recognizing their specific challenges?
Winner gets to talk about 1 Thessalonians 5:14.
Seriously, I really was going there.
All right, let's do it. Come on. All right. 1 Thessalonians 5:14 says, you admonish the rebellious, you encourage the faint-hearted, and you help the weak, and you be patient with all. So your kid has struggles, right? ADHD, whatever. Okay. So is what you're seeing then, if he's highly distractible, is this rebellion? Is it just a discipline problem? Right? Because then there's admonishment or rebuke or, in a parental sense, discipline that needs to be happening if there's rebellion. But maybe you're not seeing rebellion. Maybe what you're seeing is weakness, or maybe what you're seeing is faint-heartedness, right? He's been working really hard at school, and then he gets home and his filters and his faculties and his self-control mechanisms are just kind of shot at this point in the day, and there is no rebellion involved. It's just faint-heartedness. He's tired, right? So sometimes a nap is much more loving than you're making him take a nap, whether he wants to or not, is much more loving than discipline, right? Mm-hmm. So the question for a parent is not what do I do in this situation, or what do I do when my kid is doing that? The question is, what's going on inside my kid that's resulting in this action? And then you go for the heart, because the kid doesn't understand his own heart. I mean, adults don't even understand their own heart, right? But we got to discern these things. And so those are the 3 categories of rebellion, faint-heartedness, and weakness. And then patience is supposed to override all of that. Yeah. So by the time you get to the point of dealing with it in frustration, that doesn't fit any of those categories. And so we know that part's wrong. So we got to diagnose and then treat starting in those 3 categories.
Yeah. So as I'll speak of my experience as someone who was diagnosed with hyperactivity disorder, and I was on all the drugs, at least the drugs that they would allow you to take back then. I'm sure there's probably other ones. I think
now we just throw caffeine down your gullet and turn on a mic.
No, that's great, isn't it? I think one of the things that is vastly overdiagnosed in some respects is ADHD, especially when we consider that our schools expect children to sit with their hands folded for 6 hours a day. And especially young boys. I mean, we were designed to be protectors and hunters, and we were designed to do things and make things. And I'm not saying that ladies weren't, but we learn in a bunch of different lives and a bunch of different styles. And so to force a 8-year-old kid to sit there and stare at a chalkboard or at a whiteboard for hours at a time, trying to absorb all this stuff with all of the other internal mechanisms that are going on, saying, you got to go hunt something, let's discover things,
Right. I need a dragon to slay, and right now the dragon is boredom.
Yeah. So I think that sometimes that gets overdiagnosed. I'm not saying that there's not a physiological issue, but I think that sometimes we just expect more, or we're expecting the wrong things out of, like, say, an 8-year-old.
There may be a healthy outlet for what he's trying to do, and maybe it's not a result of ADHD. Yeah. Now, I maybe, right? Yeah. Maybe, because this is a legitimate thing. Like, there are mechanisms in our heads that just don't click into place, especially at a young age, and sometimes you grow out of it or whatever. But yeah, maybe, it's possible that what parents are seeing sometimes is not a disorder, but just a healthy thing that doesn't have a proper outlet at the moment. You can create that outlet for the kid.
Or even training, and this is one of the things I've spoken with a couple of parents who have children that struggle with hyperactivity. I said, well, you know what? Maybe treat that as a strength and not necessarily as a weakness. In other words, they can either hyper focus, which can be great. Unfortunately, sometimes they can't control what they hyper focus on, so you have to kind of help them with discipline in that area. But also, I used my hyperactivity to diagnose when I was in a former life working with computers and stuff like that.
I said it. You're not the tech guy.
I'm not the tech guy, but I could, usually with only a few pieces of data, know I could already work through all of the systems and then find the problem like that.
Yeah.
And then that was, I attribute that directly to just the way that my brain processed information super quick. And so,
Which the world would call a disorder.
yeah, but I would be that kind of guy, stick him on a wall, looking out for anything that's flashy on the horizon.
Yep.
That's not a bad place to have. Now, granted, if you can't focus him on the wall because he's looking at something else, okay, that's a problem. But I think that there are ways that we can, as a society, look at that and go, okay, here's something that you can do instead of just finding this cookie cutter one size fits all thing.
It's like my dad said, if they had Ritalin in the 1800s, we wouldn't have the light bulb.
Totally. And then add to that, look, we are called, the scriptures do call us to self-discipline. For some people, that is really easy. I'm not saying it's there. Everybody's, we all struggle with sin, but for some folks, self-discipline and self-regulation is an easier thing. And for others, it isn't.
Anybody who's got multiple kids knows this hits different kids in different ways,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
So as we gently work with our children, understanding where they're at. Look, I have a son who is an amazing guitar player. Amazing. I love listening to him play the guitar. He's just great. And one of my other sons, he is a good guitar player, but he's focused on other things right now, and he does great at those things. I can't treat son 1 like son 2.
Right.
I have to, and so part of that's the 1 Thessalonians 5 thing, but part of that is but I still train them. Like I taught my youngest a little bit about how to play the guitar. My older son, he just picked it up by watching YouTube,
right.
And he's just an amazing person at that. So to bring that out a little bit more is just saying, hey, work with them where they're at and help them to discipline themselves. For some people, we have to write things down. I have this book and I have a to-do list. And when people come to me at church and say, hey, Ben, I need you to do this. If I don't bring my phone up and tell my assistant on my phone, hey, remind me to do this, I'm going to forget.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. So train them. That's what you do.
That's what parents do.
Yeah, and if there is if there's a good solid way to use, for example, medicines and things like that, okay, fine. Be careful with that.
Sure.
But
the medicines are for a baseline, right?
Because I had some medicines and they made me suicidal as a 7-year-old. So that was a thing.
Yeah. Can you read the last sentence of that question again?
Yeah.
Because there was something in there that I want to zero in on.
Yeah, the last sentence says, so basically, how do we still have standards and require obedience while recognizing their specific challenges?
Okay, so to encapsulate a lot of what we've kicked back and forth here, that's in some sense, that question is the answer, right? How do you have standards and command obedience while recognizing their challenges? If what you're seeing is disobedience,
yes,
you discipline it. If what you're seeing is a challenge, you help them, right? And in some sense, you just have to be more stubborn than the ADHD, right? Like if a kid's particular set of challenges sets the tone for the interaction or determines the outcome of the interaction, the kid's in charge of the house. And you do not want a house that is run by, did it say how old the kid is in this question?
No.
Okay. Let's say 7, because you brought that up, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a house run by a 7-year-old, ain't nobody happy.
Yeah, that's
right?
a problem.
And so sometimes the parent's job is just to say, like, I can take this longer than you can keep it up. Like, you're going to fall asleep at a certain point tonight, and I'm going to be awake beyond that. I'm going to win. Now, how difficult this is, we're just going to work on that from here on out. But the outcome here is not negotiable, and you need to be more patient than their behavior is stubborn.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Alrighty. Ready for the next question, guys?
Probably not.
No. Go for it.
All right. Question 4. My child has different levels of attention, impulse control, obedience, etc. when taking his medications. However, these are only active in his system from about 8 a.m. to 3 to 4 p.m. Should my expectations change given my child's brain state? When his meds are active, he generally is focused on what I asked him to do and does it without complaining, and is very different in activity, focus, and impulse control when his meds are out of his system. How should we as parents handle this in a way that recognizes these challenges and differences in ability in our child throughout the day or throughout the same day while still maintaining consistency in our expectations for that child?
Yeah, you got 2 kids in one body, right? Kid A and kid B. Okay, so let me just say this. We are not going to say anything that's going to solve this, all right? I feel like there's probably a lot of disclaimers we should have at this point. We are not doctors. We are not pharmacists. We do not understand these medications and blah, blah, blah. So we're just going to talk in terms of like pastoral counseling. All right. We're going to talk in terms of like wisdom and general principles for starting to approach this. But I do not want you to take anything that we say from here on out and say, boom, got my marching orders. That's all there's going to be. This is just an area of skill that each parent has to develop with this particular situation.
Yeah.
So I'll start out by saying this on a heart level, because again, we're dealing with the heart of the child. Like compliance is not the goal here, right? The goal is to train hearts to be disciples of Christ, to equip them to be adults and contribute to the world and have families, things like this, right? So on a heart level, when your kid is off the meds, that's your real kid. Like that's what is going on in there. Now the meds, depending on what they are, if they're used properly and in the right measure, they can help achieve a baseline, which gives you access to be able to do things that you can't do when a disorder or something like that is kind of clogging up the filters for information. But when I really hate it when I see parents in this situation where they think that the medicated kid is the kid they like and the other one is a problem, right? Your real kid, as he actually is right now, is the one after 3 p.m. or whatever it is when the meds wear off. So make sure that you love that kid, right? Make sure that kid gets just as many hugs and just as much positive reinforcement and things like that, all right? So that's one. Now, another thing here is that when the meds are active and you've got a compliant child who seems more willing to listen to you, again, and I'm assuming here that the medicating of the child is necessary, which it often is not, but sometimes is. I'm making this assumption here that it is, all right? And that it is done well and responsibly by the doctors. All right, so that being the case, what you have there is an opportunity to give training that they can use instead of the meds at some point, right? Like the point is to get them to their real selves if possible. And so like people that we have in our church that are clinicians in this line and they prescribe things. They're like, I prescribe these things with the question in my mind, how quickly can we get this kid off of this stuff?
Yep.
Right. So then when they're on the meds and you've got that window of clarity with them, that's the maximum effectiveness time to be teaching them things that when the meds wear off, they're going to be expected to use and held to a standard. And it's going to be messy and it'll be a big fat emotional bloodbath. And parenting is parenting.
Yeah, welcome to parenting, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, because if you expect them to be the same, like you're not expecting humanity, you're expecting robotics, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't get that from a human child. So anyway, I think I'm repeating myself at this point, but let me just reiterate this one thing that in moments of clarity, that is an opportunity to give them tools that they can use to replace what the medication is now doing for them.
Yeah. Well, and also one of the things that I've used when I've been like a camp counselor with kids who are very high energy, high distractibility is, gently, calmly, like placing my hand on their shoulder, speaking to them calmly, not angrily, looking at them in the eye, saying, I need you to look at my eyes. This is the one thing I need you to do. That's great. There are other students where I could probably say, I need you to do these 3 things. Mm-hmm. And they would go boom, 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 and they get it done. That's not this person.
Set the standard appropriately.
Just set the standard appropriately. Part of that goes to 1 Thessalonians 5, being patient with all. And when it comes to drugs, like I admit I have a bias, okay? And I'm going to own this bias. I have a bias against a lot of pharmacological drug use, just because I remember what it was like. I remember what it was like when all of a sudden I could focus in class, which was fine, and it was good. But here's the other problem. I was robbed of my personality. I'm sure that there's clinicians who probably can tell me that I was either whatever, but I remember my personality shifting.
And I'll go ahead and be this guy for you so you don't have to be. That happened to you, and somebody was happy about it for the sake of their profit margins.
Oh, certainly.
And so there's a lot of people profiting off of the over-medication, the unjustified medication of helpless children. Yeah. And to those people, I just say, on behalf of all of humankind, screw you. All right? Yeah. But now that you don't have to say that, continue.
Well, and some of it even was to essentially enforce compliance in the classroom. That's where it was actually first recommended. My first grade teacher, I'm not going to say her name, although I do remember it, she told me I need to go to a doctor and get Ritalin. That was what I was told. And of course, my mother, God bless her, she wasn't no spring chicken. She understood medicines and things like that, and the doctors were, diagnosing these things. But the Ritalin made me compliant. Did that really help me grow? I would say no.
Yeah, you got your math homework done.
Yeah,
All
I got my math homework
At
done,
what cost?
and I did not learn how to discipline myself to study. And I didn't understand which environments I study better at. I had to pick that up in college, and that was a whole different ball of wax. And so, and I had to understand my own mental state. When I'm anxious, my brain scatters. When I'm not, I can, just understanding all these things. And rather than talking with our children in a way that they understand, I get it, and saying, hey, God made you this way. It's okay. You still have value. You still have dignity. You still have worth, and you still have purpose. And you don't need this pill to so that you can comply with the rest of us.
Yeah.
God made you in a beautiful way. Use it.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 6 years old.
Okay. So for me, that was 8th grade. I was a little older when that happened.
Yeah.
And I went to a private school in a different country, and it was a very small school, and so everybody's involved in everybody's life and whatever. Yeah. And so our headmaster pulled me in, assistant headmaster. His name was Mr. Betts. I will drop his name. Here you go. Yeah, this guy was a schmuck. His first name was Kimberly, so that was your first flag right there. Right? Anyway, so he pulls me in, and he's like, hey, man, your grades are slipping. I'm like, yeah, okay. I just didn't care, right? I think I was 14. I was getting into music was the thing, and that's the only place my brain was. And so he pulls my parents in, and he was like, hey, we want to send you to a doctor to get you evaluated. Maybe some medications would help. My mom kind of humored him. She was like, all right. So she takes me to the doctor for a day, and I get my head shrunk and whatever. And then at the end, they were like, I was having none of it. I had a terrible attitude that day. And so at the end, this Australian doctor, he's like, yeah, man, so we think that this medicine called Ritalin would help you with this. And he draws a diagram of how it connects synapses in your brain and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, dude, I'm not doing that. And my dad lit these guys up. And he was like, I'm not going to get, now these are my dad's words, right? So I'm not saying that this applies to every situation, but in my situation, it was correct.
Yeah.
He said, I'm not going to get my kids stoned just to go to school. My son doesn't have a problem. He said, my son doesn't have a brain problem. He has a discipline problem, and that's my job. So I'll take care of that, and you guys butt out, right? Yeah. And I'm like, that's right, Dad. Thank you. And he's like, you shut up. I'll deal with you when we get home.
Go, Dad. Thank you, Mr. Myers.
But he looked out. He looked at my notebooks and stuff. My math notebook full of music and song lyrics and stuff like that. My English notebook full of music. And what he told me was really interesting. And I've passed this along to so many kids that struggle with attention issues since then. My dad told me, he said, look, dude, you got a mind like a steel trap, and you're not doing well in learning how to handle it. But once you get this under control, you're going to be lethal in the world, man. This is going really good places. And I don't want to squash that. I want to empower it. But you have to do your job, right? Yeah. And so that was a lot of the conversation we had. Yeah. And so what he did was he gave purpose and context to my struggle. He was like, you're 14. This is not your whole life, right? This is the mountain you got to climb right now. Here's what victory is going to look like for you, and you want that. So go get it. So he actually gave me some ambition, along with a really swift kick in the pants.
Well, and I think that's the duty of both parents. We affirm the image of God in our kids, and we affirm that they have dignity, value, worth, and purpose. I will use that all the time.
And this is going somewhere good.
Yeah, exactly. And
Romans 8:29.
And you don't have to necessarily look. There are some things like we with all of our kids, we've had to say, look, this is something you're going to have to you just got to knock it out, right? Yeah. Like taxes, sometimes you just gotta do it.
It's Bill Belichick preaching. Exactly. Do your job.
And then, but once you knock that out, there's a ton of other stuff that you get to do that's fun and exciting. And it's good, and it contributes to society, and all these various things. Just knock this sucker out right now.
Yeah, and parenting and discipleship and all of these things existed before the diagnosis of ADHD. Yeah. So a question that pops up in my mind a lot of times is, what did we do to raise children that built healthy societies before these messianic doctors came with a pill to fix their energy problems, right? Yeah. We actually had to do our job. Now, again, this is not to take away the necessity for all medications, but I'm just talking about that massive swath of situations where it's way overused. We just toss pills at these kids like frisbees, and we're like, catch, and comply. But how did we deal with that before these modern diagnoses? And what we did was we put them to work.
Yeah.
You
did.
Yeah.
So this kind of reminds me, and I'm not necessarily saying that all parents should watch this movie with their children, right? But
intrigued.
Ever heard of the movie Equilibrium?
Yes.
Okay, you don't like that movie. Okay.
I have history. That used to be my favorite movie, and then it wasn't anymore, and the change was like that. I'll tell the story later. Okay. Please make your case.
Well, I just think it's interesting that basically this whole movie's the premise is that that everything emotional is bad. Right. Anything that creates emotion is bad. So everybody's drugged up in society. They're compliant. It's kind of like 1984 with a lot more gunplay and a lot more kung fu, stuff. It's kind of like the Matrix without all the cool graphics stuff.
The fight scenes are amazing.
The fight scenes are amazing, right? And it's got Christian Bale.
It was great.
Yeah, and Tay Diggs, great. It was really, really, well done. A little
you
violent.
Remember when he got his face? Never mind.
Yeah,
Spoiler.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, there's it's definitely a violent movie, but it also I think the undertones of it of we need to drug society so that we can be more compliant. In some ways, it feels that way. Now, and shout out to anybody who's in the mental health profession and who's hearing this and hearing me say, is that what you're saying I'm doing? No, I'm not saying that.
Well, addendum. Shout out to everybody in the mental health industry who's doing a good job.
Yes.
To the rest of you guys, repent or perish.
Yes. Okay. But in the sense of, look, there might be some times where we have to use it. Like, for example, using medicine at least to help establish disciplines. Legit. Totally legit. But using medicine as that crutch to remove all distractibility and to not have me move in an area of self-discipline. Look, the scriptures call us to self-discipline and we have to train it. Paul says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love, power, and of self-control or a sound mind. We have to do that. So we train that. So even when we have children who struggle with attention deficit, like what I'll say, this may be a difficult thing for you, but God still calls you and expects you to be self-disciplined. Let me help you with this. That's something that we tend to forget, especially if we can just give them a pill and all of a sudden they're compliant.
Yeah. Yep. Does the job for us. There's the joke that, the TV is the best parent in our house because it makes the kids quiet. And we all say that understanding like, oh yeah, that's bad parenting. To put on the TV in order to get your kids out of your hair, that's not cool. Now, I do it when we have company, especially. It's like, all right, kids, it's 8:00 and we're still having an adult conversation in here and you guys are going to calm down. Go put on a movie. I use that tool sometimes, but to let the TV raise your kids is a bad thing, right? So we have a category that this is negative in other areas of parenting.
Yeah.
We need to apply it across the board.
Agreed.
Now with equilibrium.
Okay.
All right.
What happened?
I used to love this movie. I was like, this might be my favorite movie.
Who hurt you?
Equilibrium did. Because I realized at one point, as I grew just a little bit in discernment, I watched it and I realized, oh, this is an anti-religion movie, and specifically an anti-Christianity movie, right? So you've got the God figure who commands immediate obedience with no emotion or critical thought or whatever, and he's placed above all of these people that are called clerics, religious language. And then you've got your pill that you have to take, and when you run out of your pill, where do you go? You go back to what is called the tetragrammaton, which is Yahweh, the name of God. Right?
Ugh.
And then this guy starts reading a book, a Yeats book, a poem that opens his mind, a non-Christian, literary work, and they have to kill him for it, and then they burn it. And basically, it's a remake, it's a modern update of Fahrenheit 451, where they burn all the books and the ideas. But this one it's the same storyline and the same idea. They got to burn art because it creates emotion. But anyway, it was just a direct callback to Fahrenheit 451, but it's specifically about Christianity and then religion in general.
Huh.
Yeah.
I may have to reevaluate that.
Sorry, bro.
Oh, I mean, that just means I'm going to have to go watch it again and see if I agree with you. I'm not saying.
All right, you and me, equilibrium and cigars.
Ooh.
Critical thinking like good Reformed Baptists.
Yes. And lots of gunplay.
Lots of gunplay.
And kung fu.
And the thing that happens with Tay Diggs' face that I'm not going to...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we have a last question, don't we?
We do.
It's my particular favorite on this whole thing.
Yes. So...
Alrighty.
All right, podcast princess, what do we got?
Last question, number 5. Can you play the music you use as a background for the Proverbs Devo segment? It sounds cool, and I want to jam out a little.
You're darn right I can. This one is for you, whoever wrote that. This is about, what is this? Hold on, let me find it. 17 minutes and 10 seconds of some of the coolest pod-safe music I could find on audiojungle.com.
So would we be ending the podcast with this music?
Yeah, man. This is over. I'm just going to let this play. These are some of the last nice days that we're going to have this year. And so I just want you guys to roll down the windows, let the wind in your hair, or if you're bald, just let the wind cruise right over that scalp, Mikey. And then...
We've shouted out 2 people.
I know it.
Oh.
Yeah. And then
We love you both.
We love you both. Jesus deserves disciples, guys. Have some fun headbanging to this.
This then is stereophonic sound. In its different way, this has its own